All right, everyone. I am so excited. I have Lindsey here. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you today.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I've been very much looking forward to this conversation and just hearing all about what you got going on. So I would love to first ask, what are you most excited about that's coming up in your life? It can be anything.
Ooh, that is a really fun question and kind of hard to answer because, like, literally everything is my
I love
answer.
that. I love it.
I very much feel like there's big stuff happening in my business. I very much feel excited for like future of my love life. Like I kind of just am at this point of like all the things, all the things.
That's good. That's a good thing. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that energy. So I would love to hear kind of how you got into coaching and kind of mentoring folks and a little bit more about your journey and your story.
Yeah, so this very much has come from like lived experience. So I got divorced. I split up from my ex 4 years ago now. And in the months that followed, I decided to get a coach, which I actually hired a sex coach to start with, which before that, I didn't even know such a thing existed. But I was telling a friend that sex had been a problem in my marriage, and that although I was nowhere near ready to think about like new relationships yet, I was at the point where I was like, someday I'm going to want a new relationship, and I don't want sex to be an issue again.
Right.
And I'd been convinced for years that like I was broken, the problem was with me, that kind of thing. So I hired a sex coach. And when we started, like we had the first call, I talked about my relationship and all that. And it was all good. And then we got to kind of the end of the hour and she asked about sex. And I was like, why are you saying that word? Like, and I was like,
Mm,
you just paid her quite a lot of money to be a sex coach for three
right.
months. You don't even want to say the word sex.
No, I get that. It can be hard to talk about, especially if you're not used to it. So I can completely understand that.
Yeah, it kind of gives the picture of like where I started this journey. And then, but so it quickly, I mean, as you know, anybody with any experiences will know when I said like I was convinced I was broken, obviously I was not broken, and there's a whole bunch of other pieces. And that quickly came to light, but also it very quickly expanded into bigger kind of coaching. Like it wasn't just sex because that was actually only a tiny little bit. It was far more about like looking into me and looking at the relationship and figuring out what I was accountable for. Because I kind of had this view that like I was perfect and everything that was wrong was obviously his fault. And that obviously also is not true. So it really like kickstarted this whole personal growth and personal development journey and really like looking at myself closely for the first time. And it started changing things so fast in my life, like how I showed up in every aspect of my life. And so pretty quickly I went, oh, this is like actually life changing. And I'm really jealous of my coach getting to sit on that side of the table and watch. Like, I know I'm doing it, but you're the
Right.
catalyst and you get to watch what's happening. And I want to be sitting where you're sitting.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I decided, and as I started like telling other people about like friends and stuff, and it's like people started saying to me, like, well, have you thought about being a coach? And I was like, I'll add that to my list of people who have asked me that question. And finally, I was like, if you have a list of people who have said, have you thought about being a coach? You should probably pay attention to that. And then when I started saying to people, like, I think I might want to be a coach, and they were like, well, yeah, no shit. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
I love
okay.
it. Wow. That's incredible. And that's such like a compliment because clearly if they're saying that, like you're giving good advice and like you're probably giving really good insight to like your friends and whomever. So I kind of love that. And I think it's cool too. Like I love when yeah, like a therapist or a coach, or like you meet someone just like randomly and like you start talking to them and you're like, oh wow, I'm so fascinated with what you're doing. And it's almost like you're like, oh my God, could I do that? Like, I think that happens to people a lot. But I also think on the other side of it, people will think that, but they won't actually do what that other person's doing,
Yep.
you know?
And I think it was because it came at this time of like, opening up to, well, anything is possible. Like everything that I
Mm,
thought was going to be my life isn't.
right.
And so if it can all change that suddenly, and why can't I change what I'm doing too?
100%. Yeah. I think growth is such a journey, and I think it's so powerful because I think people, I don't know, I find that some of the people that I talk to are either on a growth journey in some sort of way, or like they're at least open to it. And then there's some people who are like growth mindset versus like, oh, what is the other word? Fixed mindset. I was like, what is the word? But like I find that people who are on a journey, like no matter what kind of journey it is, like self growth, like you kind of were going through a divorce and figuring out like probably who you are too, like so
Mhm.
many different aspects of people going through any type of journey. I think when you're in it too, it's like so unbelievably powerful the amount of stuff you learn about yourself, and I think that's so beautiful. And it's something that sometimes I feel like you can't even put into words, like the amount of information and just like, oh, that's why I think that, or that's why I do that, or oh, I wonder what I was thinking about this situation, or like really so many different situations, but I always find it so interesting. So what would you say is like, I know this is going to be probably a loaded question, but like, what is something you learned about yourself through this whole process that you were like mind blown about?
Oh,
That's a loaded question.
yeah. I mean, there's like a million answers. And even now, like, so many years into this, it's still amazing. I'm like, oh man, there's another mind melter. Um, but I think one that really surprised me actually was like how much I kind of numbed my feelings towards things without even knowing it. Like I would never have said that was me. And I would have actually said so when I started dating my now ex-husband. I was
Hmm.
like, oh, he brought out so many emotions in me I didn't know I had. Like when I started dating him, and we got together when I was 20, but I was like, I
Mm,
never cried at movies before him. And I thought that like he'd unleashed my emotions. And then I don't,
right.
and he did in some ways, but I actually still like had my emotions in this like narrow kind of acceptable window. So I just like
Mm,
getting mad and getting like really big stuff like just didn't really happen. But then equally, I guess I didn't know like the full kind of joy and pleasure that could be had either. Um,
right.
and it's only, yeah, since diving into this work, well, I mean, first like the separation and then divorce, like
Right. Right.
um, and it was actually kind of my ex who pointed it out to me. So there was one time when we were still in the middle of the separation and I was like distraught, like absolutely had this evening of just full out distraught. And I remember him saying, like, Lindsay, if I could have seen even just a bit of what you're showing me now, like I had no idea that you felt this way. And
Hmm.
I was like, hang on, what? How
Right.
did you
Right.
not know I loved you this much? Like I was utterly
Huh.
baffled. And it took him saying that for me to kind of look back and go, oh, I guess I maybe didn't show you that or didn't let that out. And suddenly I was
Mm,
going, hang on, like when my friends cry, I literally never like I shut down emotion. If somebody else is crying, I don't let myself feel anything. Or and all of
mm.
these situations started swirling in my head. I was like, oh my God, I'm like a robot. Whereas now, if somebody else cries, I cry instantly.
Yeah. 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 Huh.
Just yeah, it's a whole different world.
That is very interesting. Yeah. I can't even imagine yeah, just all of the emotions and things you're going through and changes. I think change is a huge one in this too. And like, obviously, divorce is a big change. And, for our listeners, we're going to kind of get into, a little bit of divorce, dating after divorce. Cause I think that that's something I did have a woman on, I think maybe 2 years ago at this point, and she actually talked about dating after divorce. And it was something that I think is such a good topic because I think that people think, or from my point of view, what I've heard from folks is when someone gets divorced or it's you think that the world is done. I'm never going to date again. No one is going to want me. Why would someone want someone who's divorced? But let's be honest, the divorce rate is pretty high for a reason.
There's a lot
And
of divorcees out there.
right, like I think there's probably so much shame in it, which I completely understand, but maybe we can kind of like shine that light on, you know what? It's not as bad as we think. So let's kind of get into maybe like destigmatizing. Like maybe you can share some insights on like how to not feel so much shame about if you are going through a divorce.
Yeah, that is one of like my biggest bugbears, and like the phrase failed marriage. I'm like, it's not a failed marriage. It's a relationship that ended, and endings are not necessarily bad. Like we have this cultural stigma around and in other situations in life, we're like, oh yeah, of course, like you wouldn't stay at a job for your entire life anymore. Like maybe that used to
Right.
be, but no one does that anymore. But yet we still have this belief that but you have to be in that relationship forever and ever, or else you failed. And I just disagree with that so strongly because yeah, people change, relationships change. We are complicated humans. I mean, like, life is messy and complicated. And for the most part, we don't get taught relationship skills. Like, you pretty much have the narrow window of the family that you grew up in is going to be like your main source. And nobody taught them what to do either. So it's really like there's a huge piece of my work around like just having compassion for yourself and your marriage and really being able to look back on it and like pull the lessons out of it. And because another phrase that I hate is baggage, and that gets used a lot after divorce is like, yeah, no one's going to want to date me because I've got all this baggage now. It's like, or you have all these lessons and these opportunities for growth and so much more awareness than you had before. And like, I strongly believe that any like the man that I was just dating and like future relationships, they get such a better version of me than my ex-husband. Like, whoever had the first draft of me was not the luckiest one. Whoever gets the future drafts gets a far better version.
Oh, I like the way you put that and pull the lessons out of it. That is so good. So good. Because I think
Mm.
it's like, yeah, like I've heard so many of my friends, family, whomever. Yeah, they think it's a failed marriage. And I love the way you put that. Like endings don't have to be bad. Like, yeah, I'm sure you're going to go through some ups and downs and all arounds, and you're going to have moments where you'll break down and whatever. Like, that's normal. I think that that's a normal feeling. You're
Mhm.
like grieving a relationship that ended, and that's totally fine. But yeah, giving compassion to yourself and realizing you're going to learn so much about yourself and you're going to come out at the end and just know more what you want, maybe what you don't want. I think that that's so important. Like obviously breakups are really freaking hard. Like everyone knows that. Everyone on the
There's
planet
no way
knows
to make it
that.
good.
Right, right. And like it's something that it's hard, but I love the way you put that. Um, Now dating after divorce, do you have like maybe some of your favorite ways to meet people? Obviously, there's the dating apps. I don't know if you like them, if you don't like them, but kind of let's get into a little bit of how to meet people that, are divorced or they're going through the process and they're like, you know what, I'm ready. I want to get back into the game.
Yeah, I think first thing I'll say, because I get asked this question a lot, is like, but how do I know I'm ready again? Or like, what if
Oh,
I'm,
that's a good one.
and I always say to that like, you might actually not know when you're ready. Like, I kind of, if you had asked me, are you, I would have still said, nope, still not ready to think about that. But I got this little like curious itch about like, but what are these dating apps? And again, like previously, I would have been like, absolutely not. Like, I do not want anything to do with the apps. I'm of the generation that they didn't exist when I met my husband. Like, we like I was like I said, I was 20 and we didn't have apps. So I was like, no, I want no part in this world. Um, but but at some point in your journey, at some point, like nobody has like the one ideal timeline. So some people will start dating again pretty soon. Some people will take longer. Like I took a full 2 years before I even began to start thinking about dating again. For some people, that's a really long time. For others, they're like, no, like a decade. um, but but I think there's a bunch around. Like doing your own inner healing work from your breakup, but also knowing that you're never going to be done with that. So it's not like wait until you're fully healed before you start to date again, because A, that never happens. This is a continuous journey. And
Right.
B, there's very much growth and healing that can only happen in a relationship. Like there's stuff that you
That's
just
true.
can't do on your own. It's only going to come up when you're with another person. Then you're like, oh, okay, here we go. So there's an element of like, just jump into it and
Right, right.
you're gonna have to go for it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, because I think I've heard that so many times, or even like just from a relationship, they're ending, and it's like, when am I going to be ready? But I think it's like, this is my prerogative. If you get a divorce, you have a breakup of some sort, no matter what it is. And if you maybe think, all right, you know what? Let's go on the dating apps. Let's see what it's all about. And you go on a date and you're like, oh my God, this was a horrible idea. That's just one, that's a story to tell. Two, I think then you know, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm not ready for this. Like maybe if they try to kiss you and you're like, holy cow, like too soon, like you're like alert is going off in your brain, then you know, right? Like
Yeah.
play play with how you're feeling and just kind of be like, try it out. If it's like holy crap scary, then maybe don't do it for a little bit. I think
Yeah.
playing around with how you're feeling, and I think you'll know, like you'll really, I feel like you'll pick up on when you're quote unquote ready to really get into something. What are your
There's
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a really fine balance. And honestly, I'm still learning this, so
Mm,
it's not easy, but
yeah.
like being able to tell the difference between like your intuition and your gut feeling versus the fears in your head. And it can be
Mm,
tricky sometimes where you're like, is this because I'm genuinely not ready? Or is this because a fear is going, nah, don't do it. And
yeah.
but yeah, if you can build up that trust in yourself and that listening to yourself, I'm like, okay, so if you go to meet somebody for coffee, like and you're uncomfortable and your gut is being like, no, I'm not ready for this yet.
Right.
Okay, fine. All that happened is you had an uncomfortable hour and you have to say, sorry, I don't want to see you again. Like it's
Right.
not actually going to kill you. Whereas you might go,
Definitely.
like, you might be nervous about it and you go into it and then you're like, actually, that was kind of a lot of fun. Like, because like I said,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure I was ready, but then I went on my first date, which I was terrified of because I didn't even really properly date before. So I was like, oh my God, this is the first date. And actually, although I pretty much knew right away that he wasn't the one for me, but I was like, oh, that was kind of a fun experience.
I
Like,
love it.
there's gonna be more people out here that I get to like meet and talk to. And so that first one actually showed me I was readier than I thought I was.
That's really positive. Yeah. I really like that. Now, if someone is feeling not very confident about dating after divorce and they're like, you know what? Like, how am I going to rebuild my confidence? Like first date jitters, let's just say. What are some tips on like maybe trying to boost up that confidence to go on that first date with someone that you've been talking to?
I always say to people, the best thing you can do is really get to know yourself first, though. Like, if you are feeling like, I've lost all my confidence, I don't even know who I am anymore, like, then I think it's too soon to go into a new relationship. Then I think I really stress the come back to you first and foremost. Like, start to do things, and I understand loneliness and wanting to go out and do stuff, but like build up a social circle in other ways, find other hobbies to do. Um, like I was just talking to a woman the other day who she wanted to start, she was worried about like what things she could do to get her confidence up. And she wanted
Mm,
to do cycling, but cycling kind of seemed too big of a scary thing at this point. So what's
okay.
like the safest thing you could do? And she's like, well, I want to garden. I said, well, look for like you might have in England we have these allotments where you can like rent
Hmm.
a space of land and garden on that, or
I
like
love that.
my local park has a community gardening thing where like once a month.
Yes.
But just look for like little things like that. And you'll naturally start to meet other people, but it's not even that, it's a breeding ground for where you want to look for dates, but it's just you get out there, you start finding yourself again, you start talking to
Mm,
people and realizing that actually this was kind of good or kind of bad. So I really just think that, yeah, to find your confidence dating, it starts with finding yourself
Yeah.
again first, and then you go on to the bringing someone else into the picture.
I love that. Like start small too. Like you said, like, yeah, if you want to try something new, like just kind of start small and find like there so many events, like random events that I found on Facebook, like Facebook events in your area. I'm sure that you could literally search. I actually did this today. Not gonna lie. I searched small business and just like searched the events. Like I was just trying to find like if there's small business like little events around here. So you
Yeah.
could literally just search
Great idea.
one word and it's like, here you go, here's some events. So yeah, I love that idea. And like the gardening thing, like that is genius. Great way to meet people in person. Cause I know the dating apps can be very intimidating for some people and they're like, absolutely not. But I think it's a great option if you maybe are wanting to dip your toes in but not go fully into the deep end.
Yeah.
I think it can be a really great option. But yeah, I love that so much. Um,
I kind of didn't answer your question actually
oh no,
about
that's okay. Yeah, yeah.
how to start dating again. I will say that, yeah, so loads of people do come with this, like, I don't want the dating apps because loads of people getting divorced at this point are like me and didn't have them in the first place. But I will
Mm,
very much say, if you're listening to this and that's what you're feeling, they're actually, I found them to be not nearly as scary as what I thought they
well,
would
that's
be.
good. Yeah.
And people have like a massive range of experiences for sure. But like for me, Tinder is not the place.
Mm-mm. Nope.
And the universe told me that like very not subtly. I've tried to sign up for Tinder like 3 times. The first time I got banned because I couldn't pass the like, are
Oh
you
my
a real human
God.
test, which I very obviously am. I was
That's
like,
crazy.
okay. And then I've tried it like there was 2 other like nights out of desperation where I was like, let me try it. And I didn't get a single match. And I was like,
Mm,
I mean,
it's not a
like,
good app.
yeah. So Tinder's a no-go. But like for me, I really like Hinge. That's where I found good
Yep.
people.
That's where I found my fiance. So I am biased towards Hinge, but yeah, I love it. I love Hinge
Yeah. And like, and they just kind of they all have their own sort of feel. And so that's it's
for
like
sure.
you can sort of quickly get the vibe of like what that app is going to be. And then if you
Mm,
don't, so if you don't like it, well, try another one. Like there are tons out there.
exactly. There's so many, so many. And there's some for like specific things. Like I know that there's some for like if you want to be like in an open relationship or if you want certain religion, like there's so many like different ones out there. So like if you are maybe a little nervous about it, like I said, ask one of your friends if they have one and kind of go on theirs because find that if you try someone else's and kind of just like see how it is, it can
Yeah.
make you kind of feel a little bit more comfy about it. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And then I
Now,
think like just treating it like an experiment and a fun game kind of thing.
right.
Very
Yes.
much just going like, oh, who's out there? What do I like and not like? Because that's what I really started with was like,
It's
I don't
fun.
know. I've been with this guy like basically my whole life, like
Right.
for such a long time.
Totally.
It's like, I don't even know who's out there. So I went into it really open, like just gonna say yes to like loads of people
Love
and
it.
the only those who I'd actually, there was I obviously didn't say yes to everybody, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you can go, okay, you probably wouldn't be my person normally, but like let's try it. And very much
Totally.
I've been surprised and I'm like, I've been so glad that I went with the that open approach.
I like that. Yeah, I feel like being open is it is so important because like you said, you never know who you're gonna see, who you're gonna meet. Like there's so many different walks of life and different people who want different things. And I think that's the cool part of it is like finding someone who you're like, oh, that seems like a cool match. And then you get talking and it can be really fun. You can get burnt out from it. I think that that's something that's also very valid, but I think it can be a really fun experiment and experience, like
Yeah.
both of those things equally.
But
Um,
you can get burnt out from it. And I always tell people then
yes,
don't force it. Like there's
don't
definitely
force it. Yeah.
phases on and off. And it's like
Yeah.
you find yourself on the apps and being like, oh, I don't want to like then don't. Like
Right.
nobody
One,
wants to hook up with you with that vibe, and you don't like
right.
take a break, and that's okay too.
Yes, give yourself permission to take a break. I love that. I love that so much. Now what about introducing children to your new partner? Do you talk about that with your clients very often? Like, I know it probably is like a very like tough subject for some people, like maybe thinking about it or like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And I know every person might like their timeline might be different, but um maybe navigating that, if you have any tips for someone, if someone's listening and they're like, yep, I'm in that situation, I don't know how I'm going to navigate it. Do you have any tips for that?
Um, I mean, you're right. Like it's so different. And I feel like I become this broken record where I'm like, there's no one way to do it. I say that about like
Right.
every episode.
Agreed.
Um, but it's true, there isn't. But so much depends on like the age of the kids and the
Mm,
time that you've been separated from the other parent, or what your relationship is with the other parent, if they're still in the picture or not.
totally.
There's just so many factors. But I think the biggest thing is that is not rushing it, and really making sure that you focus in on like what you think is best for you and your kids, and that you respect the person that you're dating and that they're doing the same for their kids. And if you both have kids, like you might be on totally different timelines, and that's okay too. So you might meet their kids far earlier than they meet yours, or vice versa. And just really knowing that, like putting any pressure on that happening any sooner than they want, like to me is a massive red flag. Like it
For
just,
sure.
if you are trying to meet my kids before I'm ready to, then that's a
It's
no-go kind of.
not. Totally.
But like I said about like the age difference can make such a big difference. Um,
Mm,
so my kids right now are 4 and 6, whereas like the man I was just dating, his kids are 10 and 13. And so it's
gotcha.
very different in terms of his kids can process a lot more about like
Yeah.
who I am, the role in their life, what, that would be, wouldn't be, that sort of thing. Whereas my kids will instantly like glom on to any reasonably cool human who comes in. And
Right, right.
they want a stepdad. So they've got stepsisters who have like 4 parents in their lives, basically.
Yes.
Incredibly unfair that they only have 3 grown-ups in their lives, not 4. And they're like, we want a stepdad. So I've had to be really careful about like bringing
Mm,
somebody in too early, because no matter how amazing they are or not, my kids are gonna clamp onto them, and I
right.
can't I can't let that happen unless it's the right time for that. So although like I would have liked him to be more involved in our lives sooner, I knew I couldn't because of my kids' age, and that will continue to be
Right.
for a while they're so little.
That is totally understandable. Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, like figure out what fits, like you said, you and your children. And really, I love the fact that you said like don't rush, and there could be different timelines, because you're right, like someone might be like, oh yeah, you can meet my kids, and then another person's like, I'm not ready. And I think all of that's valid, and you kind of have to respect whatever that choice is, because I've definitely dated guys with children, and there's been some that I've met and there's been some that I don't, and it's like you have to just kind of take their lead, the person who has the children, and kind of just respect their decision, because I think that is so, like you said, if someone is begging for it, it's like, all right, that's a red flag for sure,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think
And
that's really valid.
there's no undo button with this kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like, so
that's a
although
good
you can
point.
you can draw out the meeting them, like once you've met, you can't undo that. It's like
That's so
so
true.
yeah, just don't rush into it.
Yeah, and being respectful, like putting yourself in the children's shoes too, like, like that mommy or daddy or whomever has a significant other, like that's definitely something that they're, gonna be living with. And yeah, it's just like there's so many parties involved too, and like obviously the other parent, like you said earlier, like that's also a factor. Now, from my understanding about folks in these types of situations, they usually speak to the other partner, like if you were to introduce your significant other and your children. So do you have any advice on like sharing, like talking to your ex-partner about that, because I think that that might be a really hard conversation to people for people to kind of bring up. So I don't know if you have any
It can
tips.
definitely be a minefield. And it can cause all sorts of co-parenting drama.
Right.
Um, and like even if you've been split up for a long time, like I think very much the first time that you introduce your kids to somebody else is going to cause ripples at some point. I mean, it doesn't always for everybody, but in my experience, that first time it happens often causes ripples in the co-parenting, even if like you've been split up for a long time and the other person has a new partner. So there's no logical reasons for it to suck. I've seen it so many times where that like the ex who's now partnered up still throws a shit fit about the first time. And it's like, come on, this doesn't make any sense. And yet I've seen it with so many people where I'm like, oh yeah, here we go again. So some people, it depends on your co-parenting relationship and how you communicate.
True.
But and again, like depending on your kids' ages. So I wanted to talk to my co-parent first before the kids met him. Um, it actually didn't quite work out that way, which caused some drama. There was I consider it an unavoidable situation. My co-parent thinks it was completely avoidable situation. That meant that he met my kids without me being able to give my co-parent a heads up, and that caused some hurt there too. Um, so I guess if you can communicate it ahead of time, um, but I did then like in my defense, I immediately did let my co-parent know and say like, hey, this happened, because what I really wanted to avoid was him finding out from my kids. Like
Right.
I don't ever want my kids to be the messenger of what's going on between either of our houses. Um,
Totally.
so I didn't want him to be caught off guard to say, hey, we met. Like, so I'm the one who delivered the message, because that
Mm,
way the adults get to have their adult reactions out
totally.
and out of emotional feel of the kids. Because it is hard. Like you loved this person at
Right.
one point in time. So again, like, no matter how much time has passed, there is often this like, oh, and like another just realization that like life is moving on and it's not what you originally thought it was going to be when you fell in love and got married and all of that. So
Right.
it makes
Totally.
sense that there's that bit of like processing and twinge. So yeah, to do that without the kids being there, I think is
Mm,
helpful.
yeah. I think that's a good plan. And I just remembered this. This was, God, over 10 years ago. I was dating this guy for honestly like pretty pretty short amount of time, but his little boy was like 2, maybe even 1 and some change. He was very young. And I think I met him like maybe once or twice, and like the his ex-wife was like, I would like to meet Janae, and I was like totally on board. So we went out to lunch, and it was actually really a nice conversation. And we ended up going to like a fair after, and it was just like a really like a carnival type of thing. It was like a really, really good conversation. She obviously just wanted to know like who I was and like wanted to make sure I wasn't a crazy woman, like
Hmm.
around her child. So I think that that can be a really really good opportunity too. Like once you share it, then like everyone kind of meets, and then obviously eventually like the children and the new partner would meet. But I think it's all about communication. I feel like at the end of the day, like just
It is.
solid communication, and like you said, it will probably hurt, and I think that's natural, right? Like you said, you loved this person, and you have children with them. They're always going to be a part of your life, but really just being communicative. And yeah, I love that. So let's
Oh,
say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like, on that idea of meeting them first, because
Mm.
that comes up a lot too. And so
Oh, yeah.
2 points on that really. First is that though, where it can happen and where that works, like in your story, that is great and wonderful. And I totally advocate that if that works. But also
Mm.
never, if you're the one like wanting to meet the other person's partner and they're saying no, you also don't have that right to. So I
Yes.
your parents be like, if they're going to spend time with my kids, I absolutely have the right. I demand to meet them. And actually, you know, we are all independent, full-grown humans here who have the right to make their own decisions. And, if
Mm,
they don't want to, like, you don't get to exert control over somebody else by saying, I have to
right.
meet them. And
That's a
then the
good
second
point.
piece is that if you are meeting partners, no matter which side of that table you're on, again, it's not to like vet them and think like, is this a good relationship? You're not giving the stamp of approval on the relationship,
Right.
which it can be so tempting to. So it's like, this isn't an interview to be like, what are your intentions with
Hey,
my ex-spouse?
right.
You are like, it's just for your own comfort that like, is my child gonna be safe in there? But even like, unless you have actual safety concerns,
Mm,
to me, that's about the only thing you get to say about that meeting. Like, it's
yeah.
like them or not like them or find them annoying or not or whatever. But like, it's it's you get to know that and get that information, but you actually don't get to really do much with that information.
That's that's a valid that's a valid thought. Yeah. Because it's like you're, yeah, it's not an interview. It's like not like, hey, why do you like my ex or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. It's like, yeah, that is an interesting thought. Yeah. I think I was very nervous for this meetup. I mean, God, I was like 20 at the time. I was young.
Big thing at that age, yeah.
Crazy. I honestly forgot about it till right now, till we just started talking about it. And I think kind of beautiful segue is co-parenting. So I have experienced my friends, some family members in co-parenting situations, some of my very close family. And on it, like it can be, I think certain people that I am very close with are very, I would consider they have a solid co-parenting plan. So let's kind of get into maybe some dynamics and maybe even like, obviously, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if from my perspective, the beginning is probably maybe the hardest part or of like getting used to it and maybe like adjusting.
Yeah.
And
It's
then hopefully it begins to get a little easier. Maybe you have some tough conversations, but I feel like from what I've seen and what I've heard, like the beginning part is kind of the hardest to adjust.
It's so hard because you suddenly need to split your relationship into two parts, which is so hard to do. But you've got
Mm,
your ex who you are breaking up with and you don't want to be with anymore, or maybe you do still want to be with, but like you're breaking up with
mm,
your ex and you're processing that. And you immediately have to jump into this brand new co-parenting relationship, and to be able to separate that you're co-parenting your ex, like you need to split that. And for me, like I use my language changed, and actually some of my close friends picked up on it. They said, oh, I noticed you're not calling him your ex, like you're calling him your co-parent. I said, yeah, like
mm,
when I'm trash talking him to you, then I'm calling him my ex. But when
right.
I am trying to do this new relationship going forward, like if I'm calling him my co-parent because that's who he needs to be in my head now.
Oh, I like that though.
Yeah, to me, that language difference made a big difference. And it was like, okay, you are my co-parent now. And what is that going to look
Mm,
like going forward? But it's so hard because you are like untangling so much of your lives together and setting new boundaries in ways that you didn't even
mm,
set. And, neither of you know where those boundaries are. And it's quite common to like fall back into like, oh, but you're my person for this. And then you're like, oh, actually, that crossed a boundary and you're too far over that line. And no, you can't. And like, it's
yeah.
a lot of this trial and error. And a phrase that I adopted pretty early on was, we are friendly, not friends. And that really helped me.
Mm,
Because in terms of like just the details that you share with each other, or the how much you're talking or when, and I needed to kind of draw that line of like, no, we're not friends in the way that I'm friends with my other people. We are friendly and we are doing this for the kids, but we're not friends, and trying to make that distinction.
yeah.
But yeah, God, even just this is like taking me right back to those days of like just trying to figure out
Mm,
what's okay and not okay. And like, and you do just figure it out, and it does take some
Right.
trial and error, and it will it will get easier. You will fall into a pattern. Like we
Yeah,
went through a couple different co-parenting schedules before we settled on the one we're at now, which thank goodness is stable, because like changing the schedule was
that's hard.
so stressful. Um, and we've been 50-50 co-parenting for 2 years now. And blips still come up sometimes, and stuff will happen and it's like, ugh. But to think about where we are now versus where we were at the beginning, it's like, oh my God, it's just like it's miles
That's
apart.
so good. I
So
love
even
that.
yeah, you're like, I don't even see how we could ever get there. Like you can.
Right.
It takes a lot of intentional effort a lot of the time. Um, but it it can change, it will change. Like that is part of all of this journey. And as your kids
Yeah.
grow up, your relationship will change because the kids' needs will
Mm,
be different. So
that's
yeah.
valid too. Right. And just, yeah, keeping the open communication. And I love that you said boundaries because that was actually one of my questions. Like, boundaries, that is so, I think boundaries are such an, like, it's such a topic that I think everyone maybe knows about and maybe thinks about, but it's such like a, I don't even know what word I'm really looking for, but I think it's something that all of us, everyone in the world should have boundaries with every person in their life. I've read a book on this and it was so fascinating, but
Mhm.
specifically co-parents, because obviously you guys were together for however long, you guys have children together, like that, and then it and then something happens and you kind of have to get into, like you said, like a new untangling and like, oh well, I used to go to that person for this, but now it's like, okay, I can't do that anymore, something has got to change. And then crossing boundaries too, like maybe communicating that too, because I'm sure that that's like a really hard pill to swallow. Like if, I don't know, something happened and you're like, ooh, that crossed the line a little bit, and expressing that, because that's probably not an easy thing to do either.
No. And as you were saying that, I was having like hundreds of examples flashing through my mind, because there are just like in every aspect you
Mm,
learn to set these boundaries, and like some are seemingly small or silly and others are like much bigger. But like one example I was thinking of was in the early days, like he'd come to my house to be with the kids, and like at one point I asked him to stop laying down on the couch. And I remember him getting really mad about that. But I was like, to me, that felt like, because this was our family home, and it was like, this isn't your home anymore. That's too familiar. That's too like you live here. When my friends come over, they don't just immediately lay down on the couch. Like this isn't how a visitor.
right.
So like it seemed so petty, but to me was such a like, again, kind of that symbolism of like, please don't lay on the couch like you live here. I like that's not what I'm
Yes.
saying. Um,
That is such a good example. That
and,
really is.
and it would have like it's the kind of thing where yeah, like it was hard to communicate and it did piss them off, but it's like, but otherwise it's gonna keep eating me up, and we need to
Yeah.
be establishing that the symbolism of those boundaries.
Mm,
And like, and whereas now, like we're at a whole different stage, but stuff like with the introducing a new partner. So there's stuff, the open communication. I shared stuff about my new partner with him and before I met the kids. But then he would ask some questions and I would say, sorry, I'm not willing to share that part. Like that's
yeah,
not relevant. I will share anything that has to do with an impact it might have on our kids, but
totally.
you're actually not prevalent to the inner workings of my relationship. And I'm not willing
Oh,
to.
I love the way you put that though. That's just straight to the point, like, hey, I'm just not willing to share that and talk about that. Yeah, because I think there's gonna be some things, yeah, like they're curious about, but it's like, nope, we're not going there. Like, that's not your business, that's mine. I like
Yeah.
that. I like the way you put that.
And it's a constant like figuring out where you need to land, but I
Mm,
cannot advocate for boundaries enough. Like you like we all need them
yes.
in all areas of our life. But yeah, in co-parenting, like if you are just like wishy-washy all over the place, like let him do when you're trying to like, okay, it's pissing me off that he's saying this stuff, but I just want to avoid a fight or whatever. Like
Mm,
that's not going to change it. Like you've got to put up, and it's hard putting down the boundaries sometimes, and it's hard maintaining them. And if you
Yeah.
let it slide, like if you let them like them break it, it can then be hard to go back and be like, I know I let it slide, but actually I need to reinforce that again. But it's worth all of the effort you put into creating those boundaries because it will absolutely pay off. Do the boundary
Yeah.
work.
Right. And nip it in the bud, right? Like if something bothers you, just like share it because then, like you said, you're that much more in control of, okay, no, this is a boundary. You crossed it, so I'm just gonna communicate how I feel about it. And I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. And like the annoying part about boundaries is they're not about what the other person does or doesn't do. It's like what you're going to do as a result. So
Yes.
like it, and it's having that awareness of, rather than being like, oh, I put up the boundary, but they keep crossing it. Well,
Mm,
actually, like it's your, if you do this thing, then I'm going to whatever. So if
right.
they did the thing, that's not them crossing the boundary. It's the, what was your reaction to it?
Yeah,
Yeah. And then you get to be
totally.
like, "Shit, I didn't react the way I wanted to that time, but I'm just going to try it again next time." Like, okay,
Mm,
next time I'm going to do
right.
this instead. So, and they change and they morph, and you might have drawn the boundary in one spot and then turns out you need it to be a bit tighter, or maybe you drew the boundary that far and you went, actually, that's kind of over the top. I can loosen that a bit, but they're, you need flexibility with them, but you need them.
Yes. I love that. I love how you put that. Um, is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to share or anything else before we get into the game?
Ooh, no, I think that's mostly it. I feel like we could just keep going and going, but for the sake of people listening who are like, okay, I'm bored now, I want to do something else in my life. We can probably cut.
Perfect. Amazing. Okay, so let's play our game. This is just called This or That. Super fun, super easy. Pick whichever one you prefer or like better. Okay, so the first one is, are you a waffle fry person or curly fry?
Ooh, waffle fry, the crispier.
Love. Are you an early riser or night owl?
um, Night owl, but I wish I was early riser.
That's valid. Do you prefer the swimming pool or the ocean?
The ocean.
Hmm. Would you prefer to be a kid forever or be an adult forever?
Adult,
Adult. Love it.
I guess.
I know it's a tough one,
Yeah,
but
it's
I
not
think,
all it's cracked up to be, but equally, I
right.
see the frustration my kids have sometimes.
Oh,
And
yeah, so
yeah,
true. Would you rather have a movie night at home or a movie night in the theater?
definitely at home.
At home. Love it. City or small town?
Small town,
Small town.
but near a city.
Yes, that's valid. That's totally valid. Do you prefer like a dinner date or like an activity date, like going to do something?
Activity.
Activity. Love it. Would you rather have eyes that film everything or ears that record everything?
Um, oh, ears that record everything. That's a tricky
I
one.
know. It's interesting to think about. The next one is, would you rather give up all technology or give up TV, movies, and books?
I guess TV, movie, and books, because all technology feels too broad to even imagine what that could possibly be.
I know. It's
Like,
hard
does
to
that mean no fridge and no microwave? And like,
Oh, I
like
don't
where we
know.
draw the line?
That's a good question. Where do we draw the line? That's a good one. Maybe just internet, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that one's hard to pull apart.
It
I would be
is.
really sad without books.
Yes, I love
So that
books.
I don't really want to give them up, but
Love it. Yeah, I'm book girly too.
mm,
Would you rather have an unlimited gift card to your favorite restaurant or your favorite clothing store?
restaurant.
Hmm. Would you rather own a private jet or own a yacht?
Oh, a yacht.
A
I say
yacht.
hesitantly. I want both.
You're like, can I please have both?
Yeah, I just definitely want both.
That's so funny. Love it. Would you rather create a new holiday or create a new day of the week?
A new day of the week,
And it would be a weekend, right?
obviously.
That's literally what I ask everyone. I'm like, it would be a weekend, right? And they're like, yes, of course. We get so ripped off with 2 day weekends and 5 day work weeks. I don't know. Whoever decided that we get to
Not
have a
like we need another
convo.
Tuesday or anything.
It's just so rude. Right, right. Um, and then I love to end off on this one: sunrise or sunset.
Oh, I love them both, but I am going to go with sunset.
Sunset. Love,
Yeah.
love it. Oh my God. Well, this was such a great conversation. Please let everyone know where they can connect with you, find all the things you got going on.
Absolutely. You can find me at Lindsey Hall Coaches on like all of the places. So yeah, I'm Lindsey Hall Coaches. I've got one-to-one and group divorce coaching packages available. And like I said, like I do the kind of the divorce, the dating, the co-parenting, kind of support through all of that. Really for that point when you get to like, oh, that was such like a drain and I am sick of that and I'm at the point where I want this to feel better now. Like
Mm,
when you want it to feel better, that is where I come into play and go, yeah, we can do that. We can absolutely do that. Um, so yeah, check me out. Instagram's like the place I kind of live the most.
okay. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for all of your wonderful insights and advice and stories. Thank you so, so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really good conversation.